The collar clicked shut before I realized the hunt had already begun. For half a second I thought it was just another bass drop, one of those violent, chest-rattling hits that made the neon lights stutter and the floor tremble. The underground club breathed like a living thing, smoke curling low, lasers slicing through sweat, bodies moving in synchronized chaos. Alpha musk burned sharp at the back of my throat, sweetened by omega heat and cheap alcohol, all of it threaded with the electric tang of overloaded circuits. Home. I leaned back in the very important person booth, boots hooked on the brass rail, looking exactly like a man with nothing to hide. That was the trick. Relaxed shoulders, lazy smile, fingers drumming to the beat while my neural implant quietly chewed through encrypted security feeds behind my eyes. 3 cameras blind, 2 exits compromised, 1 emergency stairwell still clean. Good odds. I went by a different name here. Different scent too, scrubbed, muted, synthetic. No pack signature. No past. Just another pretty omega with sharp cheekbones and a talent for staying unnoticed. People always underestimated what they couldn't smell properly. If they find me, I thought, sipping a drink I hadn't paid for, it's because I decided to stop running. The thought barely finished forming when the noise shifted, not stopped. Clubs never stopped. But the air changed, like a held breath. The crowd didn't notice, not consciously, but bodies adjusted, instincts twitching. Alphas straightened. Omegas stilled. Silence bloomed around one man. He didn't push through the crowd. He didn't need to. Space opened for him like it remembered who he was. Xavier Rain. I didn't turn right away. Didn't need to. I felt him the way you feel a storm roll in, pressure dropping, skin tightening. Something ancient and territorial brushing the edge of your awareness. So he finally stopped hunting shadows. When I looked up, our eyes met across the chaos. Steel gray. Focused. Familiar in a way I hated. 3 years vanished in a blink. His gaze didn't flicker. Not surprise. Not relief. Just confirmation. Found you. The bass hit again, harder this time. And that's when he moved. No violence. No theatrics. One moment I was lounging, the next his hand was on my wrist. Firm, controlled, warm. The touch sent a spark up my arm, muscle memory screaming danger while my face stayed calm. I opened my mouth to make a joke. Click. The sound was small. Intimate. Final. The collar settled around my throat, cool metal kissing skin that hadn't worn one in years. My implant flared in protest, systems scrambling. But the hardware was good. Military grade. Of course it was. Xavier never did anything halfway. The music kept pounding. The lights kept flashing. The crowd parted. Dozens of eyes followed us as he guided me up, fingers still wrapped around my wrist like he'd always owned the right. Whispers rippled, recognition, curiosity, hunger. An omega on a collar always drew attention. An omega, who wasn't struggling, drew even more. My pulse was steady. My smile came easy. Well, I said lightly, letting my gaze travel over him, tailored black suit, insignia of the Enclave's security division catching the light. Beautiful as sin. Deadly as ever. Wow. No hello? He didn't slow. That's rude, Xavier. His jaw tightened, just a fraction. Still the same tell. We moved through the club like a knife through silk. Alphas stepped aside. Omegas looked away. Someone reached out, thought better of it. Good instincts. Outside, the bass dulled to a distant throb. Cool air kissed my skin. The city stretched above us, all glass and steel and surveillance. Xavier finally leaned in, close enough that only I could hear him. 3 years, he said quietly. Not a question. A verdict. I tilted my head, the collar catching the light, and met his eyes with a grin that felt dangerously real. Took you long enough, I said. And somewhere deep in my chest, beneath the sarcasm and the swagger, something old and sharp stirred. Anticipation, bright and wicked. Oh, this was going to be fun. The armored vehicle swallowed us in a hush of reinforced steel and tinted glass. The door sealed with a hydraulic sigh, cutting off the city, the club, the neon chaos I'd just been stolen from. Inside, everything was quiet in that expensive, deliberate way. No rattles, no wasted motion. Even the engine purred like it had been trained. Xavier sat across from me, one knee angled slightly outward, hands resting loosely on his thighs. Perfect posture. Perfect control. The kind of alpha who didn't fidget because he'd already burned that habit out of himself years ago. I slouched on purpose. The collar was warm now, reacting to my pulse, reading me, tasting my chemistry and finding not much. I could almost hear it thinking. I stretched my legs out, boots nearly brushing his polished shoes. You always go for the dramatic entrances, I said. No warning, no backup. Very bold for someone whose job is risk management. His eyes flicked to my boots. Then back to my face. You shouldn't be alive, he said calmly. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Wow. And here I was hoping for I missed you. You vanished after the mission, he continued, ignoring me with surgical precision. No body, no scent, no trace. I tracked every lead, every false positive, every rumor. He leaned forward slightly. Not aggressive. Intent. I don't lose what I claim. There it was. I rolled my shoulders, feeling the collar shift. That's funny, I said. I don't remember signing a receipt. A muscle in his jaw flexed. Outside the city slid past in blurred streaks of white and red. Inside the air thickened. Alpha dominance pressing outward, controlled but unmistakable. He wasn't trying to crush me. He didn't need to. Xavier believed this was already over. You were mine the moment I marked you, he said. The moment you ran, you just delayed the inevitable. I tilted my head, studying him like a puzzle I'd once solved and then deliberately broken. You really believe that, I said softly. That a bite, a chemical shortcut, makes a person property. His gaze sharpened. It makes you connected. No, I corrected. It makes you comfortable. Silence stretched. The vehicle took a smooth turn, inertia barely noticeable. You were trained to fight, he said. To endure. Not to erase yourself. You think scrubbing your scent and hiding behind code makes you free? I leaned closer, just enough to invade his space. I think freedom is waking up and knowing no one gets to pull your leash. His hand moved. Not fast. Not violent. 2 fingers brushed the side of my neck, just below the collar. I felt the heat of him there, the instinctive pull my body was supposed to obey. The mark beneath my skin, old, dormant, stirred like it remembered him. Xavier's thumb pressed down. The activation command slid through the collar, clean and authoritative. I waited for it. The rush. The bond snapping tight. The familiar drop in my stomach. The chemical surrender my body had once been built to crave. Nothing happened. No heat. No pull. No answering echo. Xavier inhaled sharply. I smiled, slow and sweet, watching the certainty fracture behind his eyes. Huh. I said. That's awkward. For the first time since he'd walked into the club, Xavier Rain didn't look like an alpha who'd won. He looked like a man who'd just realized the rules had changed. For 3 heartbeats, the world held still. Xavier's fingers remained at my throat, thumb resting where the mark should have answered him. Where chemistry, instinct, and centuries of alpha certainty were supposed to snap into place. The armored car hummed beneath us, steady and indifferent, carrying us toward the security complex rising ahead like a concrete promise. Nothing happened. No heat flooded my veins. No pull curled low in my stomach. No invisible leash tugged me closer. Instead, absence. I felt it the way you feel a step that isn't there. The body prepares to land and finds only air. Xavier felt it too. His breath hitched. Just once. Barely perceptible. But I'd spent years learning to read men like him on battlefields and briefing rooms. Men trained to hide pain, doubt, fear behind immaculate posture. This wasn't any of those. This was a system error. His sense spiked. Sharp metallic anger cutting through the controlled alpha calm. Confusion followed. Fast and ugly, like static crawling under his skin. His thumb pressed harder, as if force could make biology obey. Still, nothing. The car slowed. Gates ahead slid open. Floodlights washed the windshield in white. I leaned back against the seat, deliberately casual, and let the moment stretch. Let it breathe. Let it sink in. Oh, I said lightly, watching his eyes search my face for something, anything that explained this. Did it not work? I smiled. Awkward. His hand dropped. That, more than anything, told me how badly this had shaken him. Xavier turned away, jaw clenched, staring out the window as the vehicle rolled through the first security checkpoint. His reflection in the glass looked wrong. Not weak. Not broken. Just off. Like a man hearing a familiar song hit the wrong note. That's impossible, he said, voice low and controlled, like he was speaking to himself as much as to me. Funny, I replied. That's exactly what they said about me surviving the mission. His gaze snapped back to me, sharp enough to cut. What did you do? I shrugged. You make it sound like I rewired the universe between drinks. You altered something, he said. The mark doesn't fail. I crossed my arms, the collar warm against my skin. More decoration than restraint. Maybe it didn't fail, I said. Maybe it just wasn't invited. The car came to a smooth stop beneath the complex's overhang. Heavy doors loomed ahead, all authority and consequence. Xavier stared at me for a long moment. Not as prey. Not as property. As a problem. As something new. Get out, he said finally. I did, slowly, deliberately, meeting his eyes one last time before stepping into the sterile glow of the compound. For 3 years, I'd been running. Now I'd just made the hunter doubt his claws. And that was the most dangerous place an Omega like me could stand, right in front of an Alpha who no longer understood the rules. The residential sector looked nothing like a prison. That was the point. Clean lines. Soft lighting. Neutral colors chosen to calm the nervous system. The kind of place designed by people who believed control worked better when it didn't feel like control. I was escorted through the corridor by 2 Alphas I didn't recognize, both tall, both wearing. The quiet, obedient confidence of men who'd never questioned the system they served. Their scents were muted, disciplined. Loyalty smelled like iron and antiseptic. No one touched me. No restraints. No cuffs. Just the collar. Warm, watchful. Humming faintly against my pulse. We stopped outside a door that slid open with a soft chime. This is your unit, one of them said. His tone was polite. Professional. Empty. I looked past him. A bed. A table. A window that didn't open. Comfortable. Contained. And the lock? I asked. There isn't one, the other Alpha replied. He almost smiled. You have nowhere to go. Ah, there it was. They left me standing in the doorway like I might bolt just to prove a point. I didn't. Instead, I stepped inside, ran my fingers along the edge of the table, and took in the faint hum of surveillance hidden behind the walls. A cage made of rules. I hadn't even finished mapping the blind spots when Xavier entered. Alone this time. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching me with an intensity that felt recalibrated, less certain, sharper. You're not locked in, he said. I noticed, I replied. Very trusting of you. This isn't trust, he said calmly. It's reality. You erased your scent. You have no pack, no territory, no allies in the enclave. He stepped inside, letting the door slide shut behind him. Omegas survive because the system protects them. I turned to face him. No, I said. Omegas survive because we adapt. The system just likes to take credit. His eyes narrowed. You were trained to fight, he said. That doesn't change what you are. I smiled, slow and sharp. Funny how that only ever comes up when it's convenient for you. He gestured to the collar. That should be keeping you compliant. Should, I echoed. I focused. Not on the collar itself, but on the space around it. On the feedback loop it was trying to establish. The pressure. The command. I let it push. Then I pushed back. The collar buzzed, low and irritated, like a device encountering an incompatible system. Xavier felt it. I saw it in the way his shoulders stiffened. That's not possible, he said again. You keep saying that, I replied. You should consider updating your vocabulary. He stepped closer. Too close. Alpha dominance rolled off him, instinctive and honed. Once it would have sunk into me, softened my spine, quieted my defiance. Now it slid past like water off glass. I didn't lower my gaze. I won't submit, I said evenly. Not to you. Not to the collar. Not to whatever rulebook you're clinging to. Silence stretched between us, heavy and charged. Finally, Xavier exhaled. A slow, measured breath. This changes nothing, he said. I laughed softly. You're wrong. I met his eyes, unflinching. It changes everything. Sleep came in fragments. Not dreams, records. Sterile white bled into concrete gray. The hum of machinery folding into the echo of boots on steel floors. My body remembered before my mind could stop it. Training base Delta smelled like sweat, oil and ozone. No neon. No music. Just discipline. We were 6 in my unit. 4 alphas, 2 omegas. Officially, we were a mixed capability response team. Unofficially, we were an experiment wrapped in tactical jargon and government funding. They called it Project Ghost. Your biology is a liability, the instructor used to say, pacing in front of us like a bored god. We're here to correct that. Correction meant injections that burned cold through my veins. Drills designed to exhaust instinct before muscle. Simulated combat where alphas were ordered to dominate and omegas were punished for responding. I learned quickly how to slow my breathing when an alpha's scent spiked. How to redirect the pull of heat into focus. How to smile while my body screamed betrayal. The labs were worse. Bright lights. Stainless steel. Men and women in white coats who never used our names, only numbers and variables. They mapped our responses, our failures, our resistance. This one's promising, someone said once, tapping my chart. Minimal dependency. High aggression retention. Promising. Like I was a weapon that hadn't malfunctioned yet. The mission came 3 months later. High risk. Deep territory. Orders classified above our pay grade. We were sent in to extract intel from a rogue pack. An easy in and out, they said. It was a lie. The ambush was precise. Too precise. Fire from angles only command could have known. One alpha went down before he could shift. Another never made it to cover. I remember the smell most. Fear. Burnt fur. Blood. And then the order crackled through comms. Flat and emotionless. Ghost team compromised. Abort retrieval. Abort, not rescue. I dragged one of the omegas, Rin, through debris while bullets chewed the walls behind us. She was bleeding, panicking. Her scent spiraling out of control. Any normal alpha would have snapped, instincts hijacked. I didn't. I covered us. Returned fire. Calculated exits. We almost made it. Almost. Command cut the channel mid-transmission. No evac. No backup. Rin died with her hand on my sleeve, eyes wide, whispering my name like it meant something. I didn't stop running until my lungs burned and the city swallowed me whole. After that, there was no pack. No command. No home. Just a truth I couldn't ignore. They hadn't wanted soldiers. They'd wanted proof. Proof that omegas could be stripped down, reprogrammed and deployed without inconvenient things like bonds or choice. Proof that biology could be owned. So I finished what they started. I found a back alley clinic with equipment that buzzed and flickered and barely passed safety checks. I paid in favors and stolen data. I lay there while they burned my scent glands down to nothing, chemical fire rewriting my very presence. It hurt. God, it hurt. But when I stood up afterward, shaking and empty and free, the air didn't answer me anymore. No pull. No echo. Just silence. Back in the present, in Xavier's pristine containment unit, I woke with my heart racing and my jaw clenched. I stared at the ceiling, breathing through the memory, through the ache that never quite left. They tried to own my biology. I rewrote it. And no collar in the world was going to take that away from me. Xavier's office sat at the highest level of the complex, all glass and steel and carefully curated dominance. The city sprawled beneath us in orderly lines, lights pulsing like a controlled heartbeat. Power loved a view. I stood near the window, hands in my pockets, collar warm but quiet. Not buzzing. Not pushing. Just there. Decoration. Xavier watched me from behind his desk, fingers steepled, expression carved from discipline. But something in him was off. A tension I hadn't seen before. Like a fault line forming under polished stone. Again, he said. I raised an eyebrow. You know, if this were a date, you'd be paying me by now. His mouth twitched despite himself. He straightened, then reached out, not to touch me, but to trigger the collar's interface. The room hummed softly as systems synced. Mark activation, he said. Nothing. No pull. No heat. No answering thrum beneath my skin. The collar went silent. Not resisting. Not malfunctioning. Empty. Xavier froze. I felt it then. Truly felt it. Not as absence, but as freedom. The mark wasn't dormant anymore. It was gone. Completely. Xavier's breath left him in a sharp exhale. His gaze flicked to his hand, then to me, like he expected reality to correct itself if he stared hard enough. That's not possible, he said again, but this time the words lacked conviction. I keep telling you, I said gently. You should really stop betting on impossible. He turned away, pacing once, twice. Controlled steps, measured anger. But underneath it, Doubt. For 3 years, he said, voice low. I believed you ran because you were afraid. I leaned back against the glass, sunlight warming my shoulders. I ran because I didn't want to belong to something that would trade my life for data. That stopped him. He turned slowly. What? I met his eyes without flinching. Project Ghost, I said. Does that name mean anything to you? The color drained from his face just enough to notice. I thought it was terminated, he said. It was, I replied. With us still inside. Silence fell between us. Not tense this time. Heavy. Real. I don't want control, I continued. I want choice. That's the part you were never taught to ask for. Xavier swallowed. Once. You should hate me, he said quietly. I considered that. The easy answer. The expected one. I did, I said. For a long time. I pushed off the glass and took a step toward him. He didn't retreat. But hating you won't give me back what they took. And pretending I'm prey won't keep you safe from the truth. His voice was rough when he spoke again. And the truth is? I smiled, not sharp, not defensive. The mark is gone, I said. And I'm still here. For the first time Xavier Rain looked at me not as something to control, but as someone who had chosen to stand in his office without chains. And that scared him more than any Omega ever had. The kitchen was quiet in that late night in-between way. Too early for morning staff, too late for authority. Lights dimmed to a soft glow. Stainless steel counters reflected the city's distant shimmer through the windows. I stood barefoot at the counter, stealing someone's premium coffee like it was a crime worth committing. The collar rested against my throat, inert, no more commanding than a piece of jewelry. Xavier hovered near the doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. Less alpha, more man. You always break into secure facilities for caffeine? He asked. Only the ones with good beans, I said. Your security is impressive, by the way. Very trusting, he huffed. Almost a laugh. We stood there for a moment, the silence comfortable instead of sharp. That was new. So, I said, pouring water into the machine. Is this the part where you interrogate me under fluorescent lights, or are we skipping straight to the existential crisis? He leaned against the counter across from me. I don't need to interrogate you. I arched a brow. That might be a first. I want to understand, he said. The words landed harder than any order ever had. I paused, fingers resting on the mug. Understand what? How you live like this, he said. Without a bond, without a pack, without anchoring. I studied him over the rim of the cup. You're really asking? Yes. No command. No pressure. Just a question. I exhaled slowly. It's quiet, I said. At first, the silence is terrifying. Your body keeps waiting for something to answer it. For heat, for direction, for permission. I took a sip. The coffee was good. Figures. But then you start hearing yourself, I continued. Your own thoughts, your own wants. You stop measuring every reaction against someone else's instincts. Xavier listened like it mattered. I sleep when I'm tired, I said. I fight when I decide it's worth it. I leave when staying would cost me more than I can afford. And the loneliness? He asked quietly. I smiled, small and honest. It's real. But it's not fatal. He nodded, gaze dropping to the counter. I was taught that Omegas needed us. You were taught that Omegas made Alphas feel necessary, I corrected gently. That earned me a look, sharp, then thoughtful. You don't flinch anymore, he said suddenly. I do, I replied. Just not when someone tries to own me. Silence stretched again. Not awkward. Intimate. Xavier straightened, then hesitated. Actually hesitated. May I? He asked, gesturing vaguely toward my collar. The question sent a strange warmth through my chest. You can touch it, I said. It won't listen. His fingers brushed the metal, careful, almost reverent. There was no surge, no pull. Just skin on skin. I don't know who I am without control, he admitted. I met his eyes. Then maybe it's time you find out. For a moment the city outside seemed very far away. We stood there, two people unbound by chemistry, talking like equals in a kitchen that smelled like coffee and possibility. No chains. Just choice. And for the first time, I didn't feel like leaving. The council chamber smelled like old power. Polished stone. Recycled air. Alpha dominance layered so thick it clung to the back of my throat like smoke. I stood exactly where they wanted me, center of the room, collar visible, hands free just to prove how generous they were being. Around us, the elders sat in a half circle, all silver hair and sharpened instincts. Alphas who'd never fought their own biology, and never questioned why they didn't have to. Xavier stood beside me. Straight-backed, immaculate, mask firmly in place. "You've confirmed the anomaly," one of the elders said, fingers steepled. His eyes never left my throat. "The Omega exhibits suppression of bonding response." "Temporary," Xavier replied smoothly. "Likely the result of illegal chemical alteration." I didn't look at him. "Not yet." "Illegal or not," another alpha cut in, voice sharp with disdain, "he is defective." There it was. Not dangerous. Not unstable. Defective. "He represents a breach in biological order," the elder continued. "An Omega who does not respond to a mark undermines the foundation of pack hierarchy." I smiled faintly. Bad habit. It earned me a glare. "Return him to the research division," someone said. "We can reverse the damage." Reverse. Fix. Correct. I finally turned my head and looked at Xavier. He didn't meet my eyes. They'll kill what's left of him, I thought. Not out of cruelty. Out of curiosity. Project Ghost was shut down, Xavier said evenly. A ripple moved through the chamber. Annoyance. Surprise. It was paused, the first elder corrected. "For lack of results." "I am the result," I said. Silence slammed down hard. Every head turned toward me. Alpha attention snapping like a trap. I felt the pressure push, instinctively testing me for weakness. I stood my ground. "He survived an abandoned mission," I continued. "He adapted." "That doesn't make him broken. It makes him inconvenient." "Inconvenient Omegas don't get choices," an elder snapped. "That's where you're wrong," Xavier said. Now he looked at me. Just for a second. A decision passed between us. Unspoken, electric. "The mark isn't gone," he said calmly. "It's unstable." My heart kicked hard against my ribs. "The collar confirms residual bonding data," he went on, voice steady, authoritative. "Any attempt to extract or recondition him could cause cascade failure." A lie. Clean. Convincing. Dangerous. "You'd risk losing him entirely?" the elder asked. "I'd risk your displeasure," Xavier replied, cool as steel. "Yes." The chamber buzzed. Calculation replaced outrage. Power respected leverage. Finally, the eldest alpha leaned back. "Very well. He remains under your authority." My jaw tightened. "Contain him," the elder added. "Study him. If the defect worsens, we reclaim the asset." Asset. The meeting adjourned just like that. No ceremony. No justice. Just decisions made over lives. As we left the chamber, Xavier didn't touch me. Didn't guide me. He walked beside me. Only once the doors sealed behind us did he exhale. "That lie," I said quietly, "will cost you." "I know," he replied. I glanced at him. Really looked. His control was still there, but cracked. Reshaped around something sharper. "What made you choose?" I asked. He met my gaze, expression hard. "The enemy isn't you," he said. "It never was." And in that moment, I understood. The system that built us, broke us and called it order. That was what we were fighting now. The helipad sat at the edge of the complex like an unfinished sentence. Wind tore across the open concrete, sharp and clean, carrying the distant thrum of the city below. Red warning lights pulsed in slow intervals, painting everything in flashes of blood and shadow. No walls. No cameras close enough to matter. Just sky. Xavier stood a few steps away from me, coat snapping in the wind, posture rigid in a way that had nothing to do with dominance. His eyes weren't on the horizon. They were on me. "This is as far as the system tracks," he said. "Beyond this point, I can't stop you." I laughed softly. "You say that like you ever could." A corner of his mouth twitched. Then his expression settled into something heavier. He reached for the collar. Instinct flared, old reflex, sharp and fast. But I didn't step back. I watched his hands, steady and deliberate, as he keyed the manual release. No authority codes, no commands. Just a choice. The collar loosened. For a breathless second, it clung to my skin like it didn't want to let go. Then it fell away, metal hitting concrete with a hollow final sound. The wind touched my throat. Bare. Unclaimed. Xavier straightened. the distance between us suddenly vast. "If you leave," he said, voice rough, "they won't find you again. I'll make sure of it." I turned toward the edge of the pad. The city stretched out below, endless and anonymous. 1,000 places to disappear. 1,000 doors I could open and never look back. Freedom waited. I thought of Rin's hand slipping from mine. Of the lab lights. Of years spent erasing myself so no one could own me again. And I thought of a kitchen at midnight. Of coffee. Of a man who'd learned how to ask. Xavier said nothing. Didn't step closer. Didn't reach out. He let the silence do the work. The wind howled. The lights pulsed. I turned back. "I'm not yours," I said clearly. His shoulders stiffened. "I'm staying." For a moment, I thought he might argue. Insist. Demand I rethink it. Instead he exhaled slowly, like a man releasing something he'd been holding too tight for too long. "Then stay," he said. "As yourself." I stepped closer, not into his space, not seeking shelter from his presence. Just standing beside him, shoulder to shoulder, facing the open sky. "No leash," I added. A faint smile touched his lips. "No leash." The city kept breathing below us, indifferent and alive. Somewhere inside the complex, systems would be recalculating. Alarms, waiting to be triggered by decisions that hadn't been made yet. But up here, in the open air, there was nothing but choice. I didn't know what staying would cost me. I only knew that this time, it was my decision to make. And that made all the difference. The room wasn't special. That was why it mattered. No cameras. No glass walls. No soft authority disguised as comfort. Just a simple space tucked deep inside the complex. Bare walls, low light. A window that actually opened. The air moved freely. So did I. Xavier closed the door behind us and stopped there, hands still on the handle, like he was waiting for an order that wasn't coming. I leaned against the table and crossed my arms. "You're thinking too hard." He let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "That obvious?" Painfully. We stood there for a moment, two people who'd survived control in very different ways, suddenly unsure what to do without it. "So," I said, breaking the silence, "is this the part where you say something dramatic, or do we just awkwardly stare until one of us combusts?" His mouth curved despite himself. "You always deflect with humor?" "Only when I'm nervous," I replied honestly. That surprised him. It surprised me too. He stepped closer, not looming, not claiming space, just approaching. When he stopped, there was still room between us, a choice left open. "May I?" he asked quietly. I nodded. His hand brushed my arm, tentative, like he was relearning how touch worked without permission granted by biology. The contact was warm, real, no surge of instinct, no chemical rush hijacking my nerves, just awareness. "Huh," I murmured. "Turns out I don't burst into flames." "Disappointing," he said dryly. "I was prepared for at least sparks." I laughed, the sound easing something tight in my chest. "You're doing fine, Alpha." His thumb traced a slow line along my wrist, following the faint scars there. His attention was focused, reverent even. Not ownership, interest, desire. "I don't feel compelled," he admitted. "No pull, no demand." "Good," I said softly. "Neither do I." When he leaned in, it was careful. A question, not a statement. Our foreheads touched first, an accidental intimacy that made my breath hitch. Then our lips met. Slow, exploratory. A kiss that waited for consent with every second it lasted. I felt everything. The warmth of him, the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his breath stuttered when I kissed him back. No mark, no bond. Just want. When we pulled apart, I rested my forehead against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Steady. Human. "This is new," he murmured. "For both of us," I said. His arms wrapped around me, not trapping, not claiming. Holding. I let myself sink into it, the simple truth of being wanted without being owned. For the first time in a long time, my body wasn't responding to programming. It was responding to choice. And that made every touch feel like something earned, not taken. Change didn't arrive with fireworks. It crept in quietly, the way systems always did when they were being rewritten from the inside. Weeks passed. Then, months. The enclave kept running, streets humming, towers lit, security drones, tracing familiar patterns. But something underneath had shifted. Orders took longer to finalize. Committees stalled. Files disappeared from archives they'd always lived in. Project Ghost was one of them. Officially, it was decommissioned due to ethical noncompliance and operational instability. Unofficially, its data core vanished during a routine system migration. I might have had something to do with that. I worked from the shadows now. No title, no badge. Just access. I slipped through firewalls the way I once slipped through combat zones, dismantling programs that smelled too much like ownership disguised as protection. Xavier knew what I was doing. He didn't stop me. His office changed too. Less glass. Fewer symbols. He still ran security, but the rules he enforced were different. Consent protocols were updated. Omega autonomy clauses expanded. PAC authority required accountability instead of assumption. The council hated it. The city didn't. We never announced anything. We didn't need to. Omegas noticed when collars stopped being standard issue. Alphas noticed when commands started coming with explanations instead of expectations. Balance isn't loud. It's persistent. One evening I stood on a balcony overlooking the lower districts, the wind cool against my neck where the collar used to rest. Xavier joined me, handing over a data slate. Last of the experimental nodes, he said. Shut down. Permanently. I scanned the report, then nodded. Good. He hesitated. You could leave now. I looked at him. Really looked. The man who'd once hunted me through neon and smoke now stood with his hands open, offering information instead of control. I know, I said. He didn't ask why I stayed. That was part of the new order too. Down below the city glowed. Messy, imperfect, alive. Not free. Not yet. But closer. For the first time, I wasn't surviving on the edge of someone else's rules. I was helping write new ones. And that felt like victory. The chamber was smaller than the council hall and far quieter. No elders in a half circle. No thick layers of dominance pressing down like doctrine. Just a clean room, a single console, and a handful of officials whose authority came from signatures instead of instinct. I stood in the center, shoulders loose, breathing easy. Xavier was beside me, not as my handler, not as my alpha. Just as a man who had chosen to stand there. The subject, one of the officials began, eyes flicking briefly to my throat, has demonstrated permanent suppression of biochemical bonding response. I suppressed a smile. Subject. Attempts to re-establish the mark have failed, she continued. Further enforcement would constitute unlawful coercion. The room hummed softly as data scrolled across the screen behind her. Graphs, timelines. My biology laid bare in lines and numbers that no longer felt like chains. By authority of the Enclave, she said, the mark is hereby annulled. There was no flash of light. No dramatic sound. Just a soft chime. And then it was done. I touched my neck out of habit, half expecting to feel something, an echo, a ghost of what had once lived there. Nothing. Only skin. A breath left my chest that I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. It felt like my lungs were learning how to work again without bracing for impact. Xavier shifted beside me. You're free, he said quietly. I looked at him and smiled. Not sharp, not defensive. Light. I always was, I replied. Now it's just official. Outside, the city greeted us with open air and pale morning light. The towers didn't look different. The streets still hummed with traffic and life. But I did. For the first time since Project Ghost, since the mission, since the lab lights, and collars and erased scents, my body wasn't waiting for permission to exist. Freedom didn't roar. It floated. Xavier stopped at the edge of the plaza, hesitating like he might say something important, and didn't want to ruin it by forcing the moment. I turned to him. You know, I said, you don't have to stay either. He met my gaze, steady and unafraid. I know. We stood there, unmarked, unclaimed, choosing each other in the quiet space where obligation used to live. The mark was cancelled. What remained was lighter than anything I'd ever worn. Morning light spilled into the kitchen like it had nowhere better to be. I stood barefoot on cool tile, wearing an old t-shirt that definitely wasn't mine, arguing with a coffee machine that refused to acknowledge my authority. Steam hissed. Buttons blinked. The city outside was just waking up, soft and unthreatening. No, I told the machine firmly. You don't get to beep at me like that. It's winning, Xavier said from the doorway, hair still damp from the shower, voice thick with sleep. You should surrender. Never, I replied, jabbing a button with unnecessary force. The machine beeped again. Triumphantly. Xavier laughed, actually laughed, and stepped in to rescue the situation with practiced ease. Coffee began to pour, rich and dark, filling the room with a scent that felt like peace. I leaned against the counter, watching him. No uniform, no insignia. Just a man in rolled sleeves making coffee like it mattered. Hard to believe, I said, that you once hunted me through a club. He glanced over his shoulder. Hard to believe you smiled about it. I still would, I said. For the drama. He handed me a mug. Our fingers brushed. Nothing sparked. Everything warmed. We sat at the small table by the window, city sounds drifting in, traffic, voices, life continuing in its messy, imperfect way. So, Xavier said, blowing on his coffee. Any plans today? Shutting down another compliance protocol, I replied casually. Meeting about collar decommissioning, he said. Again, I grinned. Living dangerously. He shook his head, smiling. You've changed this place. I considered that, then shrugged. You helped. Silence settled between us, comfortable and earned. I rested my head against his shoulder, feeling the solid reality of him there. No collar, no mark, no chains, just coffee, morning light, and a choice we kept making, every day. And somehow, that felt like the happiest ending imaginable.